If you're a heel down drummer who struggles to achieve significant speed and volume on your kick, and you've been led to believe that you need to switch to heel up in order to solve this, then today's lesson is for you. I'm sharing with you why your throne placement and height may actually be the problem. And I'll give you 3 steps to achieving the comfort, speed, and volume that I believe you can get with heel down technique. You can do this. Hey, welcome to the Non-Glamorous Drummer. I'm so glad you're hanging out with me today. I help beginner and intermediate drummers become the musicians that sound awesome and that people want to play with and have in their band. And we do this by teaching you the core skills that get you rapid results that lead to long-term growth and mastery of the drums. And hey, while you're here, if you are a drummer who is plateauing, who's stuck in a rut, you have no idea what to practice. Let's just be blunt. Let's just be honest. You don't know what to practice. You feel like you're getting nowhere. I've got a special gift for you. Download my totally free guide. It's the Know What to Practice 3-part daily practice routine guide. What this does is it shows you how to build your custom 30-minute-a-day practice routine, practicing the most important things. So you're doing a little bit every day, but the most important things, so this is also telling you what not to practice, so that you're growing day after day, week after week, month after month, and becoming the drummer you are made to be. We cover hand technique, coordination, listening, all the key elements here. This is your guide that's going to deliver long-term results so that you can really master the drums. Download it, print it off, whatever you want to do. It's in the description below, the Know What to Practice guide. All right, on with today's lesson. We're going to talk about how to find your perfect throne placement as well as your perfect throne height following some simple guidelines. And then we're going to have some fun with some gear talk. We're going to talk about round versus bicycle seat thrones. I'll share with you my thoughts on those and why, as well as backrest or no backrest. So it'll be kind of fun. We'll talk about some gear, but first let's dive into the 2-to-1 rule. Find your ideal throne placement for maximum speed and volume. This is really important. You see, the problem is that we tend to sit too close, especially those of us taller individuals. If we're not careful, we end up sitting too close to the kick drum and cramping up our leg and not giving ourselves enough space to work, which is so important when playing heel down. So here's what I want you to do. Take your drum stool away from your kick, go set it somewhere else in the middle of the room, or spin over to the side, whatever, and place your foot out there on the floor wherever you actually feel most comfortable playing. So like if we're thinking heel down, okay, I'm gonna spin around this way. I'm gonna try putting my foot way out here. Okay, that's pretty far. Okay, this is too close. What I want you to pay attention to, if you've got your heel planted and you're pivoting your foot up and down, playing heel down, at what point is your foot so close to you that you feel strained lifting it up? At what point does that become difficult? You'll notice there's a point where it's hard to lift it up, and then as you extend further away, it's easier to lift it up. Yes, you're still using some of these shin muscles, but it is no longer strained once you have enough space. So you have to figure out what that distance is for you. Gradually have your heel further away from you, figure out, okay, how far do I have to go before I can lift my foot like this and not feel strained? See, if I have my leg right here, I feel very strained lifting my foot, but I move out to here, oh, well, that's a lot more effortless. So play around with that. And then once you find that sweet spot, get a tape measure or line up some drumsticks, whatever you got to do, and measure the distance between your heel and the center of your drum stool or a leg of your stool, whatever makes sense to you. But get a measure for that distance, and that way you can translate that to your kit. Bring the stool back over and measure from, okay, here's where my heel's gonna go, measure that distance, get your drum stool exactly where it needs to go so that you're comfortable. So ultimately, I think that is the best method for figuring this out, but you can also follow the 2-to-1 rule. So it happens that this works out really well for me. This guideline works perfectly for my height and for my preferred sitting distance. Maybe it will for yours too. But basically just take your height, however tall you are, divide it by 2, and then measure that distance from the hoop of your kick drum to the center of your drum stool. And that's how far you should sit. So what you could do is follow that first method a minute ago of finding what's comfortable to you, translating that to your kit, and then measure and see if you happen to be close to that. Like if you're 6 feet tall and you find, okay, I'm 3 feet back, okay, cool, that worked out. See if it's close to that. If not, don't sweat it, because ultimately go with what's comfortable to you. But if you want to just check it, or you want a good way to just get started and at least know you're in the ballpark, that 2-to-1 rule works really well. Just remember that the whole goal here is that we want to give our leg enough space to work fluidly. Anytime our bodies are cramped up, imagine if you're like playing drums in a tiny box and you're all cramped up like this. How is anything going to be fluid and free and relaxed and smooth and loud and fast? All those things that are good things that we want our drumming to be characterized by. How is that going to happen if we're cramped up? So you've got to give yourself space, and especially if you are taller like myself, because I'm almost 6'4", I've got to give myself adequate space to be able to move loosely and freely. So believe me when I say, following the 2-to-1 rule, finding what's comfortable for you, giving your leg enough space is going to allow you to play not only faster, but also louder and more relaxed and fluidly. Bouncing the beater, which is going to help a lot. There's some additional lessons I'll link in the description about that regarding technique. We're not digging into technique and strength building today. I'm just getting you set up and squared away for that. So I'll link some lessons you can dive into next for really building your strength and making sure you're maximizing all the potential down there on your kick drum pedal. Next, let's talk about thrown height. So here we're going to talk about the 3-to-1 rule. So we had our 2-to-1 rule, height divided by 2 for distance. 3-to-1 rule for finding your ideal height to avoid back strain. So a lot of heel down drummers are sitting too low. I was definitely included in this. Back when I first got started, my drum stool consisted of an old rickety piano bench that was not high enough. I was in like 8th, 9th grade when I got my first drum set, and I wasn't as tall then as I am now. I hit my growth spurt in high school. But I was tall enough that this little piano bench, I outgrew it very quickly, and I was then sitting too low for my height. And what happens, what I've noticed, you may have noticed this too, but if you're not sitting high enough, if you're sitting too low, number one, it causes you to slouch a little bit. It's easier to kind of, hunch over like that, just like if you sit down into a really low, cushy sofa. But also, it'll cause lower back strain. I've noticed whenever I don't sit high enough, my lower back hurts. It has to do with the hips and the angles here. I don't know all the anatomy behind this. You can probably find some information out there on this and why this is the case. But you'll find that this is likely true for you too, that if you're not sitting high enough, you're going to deal with some lower back strain. And so if that's something you've dealt with, I definitely recommend try just sitting a little higher. Go like 2 inches higher and see if that doesn't solve it. So first off, just adjust your stool height until it feels right. I know that's super subjective, but that's why we have the 3-to-1 rule here in a moment. Find what feels right. Make sure that your upper leg is sloping down. That's what's very important. Make sure that your knee is not level with your hips, and especially not higher than your hips. I think that's a given, obvious. But make sure that there's a nice gentle slope downward. That's going to help so much with just relaxing your core, helping you balance better. A lot of times drummers talk about just struggling with balancing at the kit and actually feeling balanced, and a lot of times they feel like they're teetering, especially heel up drummers. Now our advantage to playing heel down is that gives us some stability, but we still got to sit high enough that our core isn't having to work really hard. What also happens, a lot of heel up drummers need to sit even higher. If you're going to play heel up, you really need to be even higher than if you're playing heel down. And if you're not high enough, that's going to cause the teetering and cause the lack of balance because you're straining your back, making your core work harder. So all this to say, make sure you're sitting high enough. The 3-to-1 rule, as you might guess, divide your height by 3 and then adjust your thrown to that height. This works out really conveniently for me. So I'm 6'4", so that means divided by 3 is going to be like a little over 2 feet and an inch. Depending on your thrown cushiness, it's going to vary because I'm measuring from floor to the top of my thrown seat. If it were a cushier thrown, I would actually need to go higher, right? Because then I sink into it. Versus if your throne's very firm, then you could adjust on the low end of that spectrum. So take that with a grain of salt. Every stool is going to be a little bit different depending on the cushiness factor. If you sink 2 inches into it, then adjust it 2 inches higher than a third of your height. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's a good guideline. If you want to start there, absolutely start there. I think that's a great guideline for heel down drummers. Just take your height divided by 3 and measure that to be the height of your drum stool. A higher seat will encourage better posture, reduce back strain, and give your leg just more space to operate. Remember, by sitting back far enough, we're making things easy on our knees and our ankles, and by sitting a little higher, it's basically just accentuating that and helping that out, aiding that. So we've got plenty of space so that nothing is scrunched up. Now, I have additional lessons, like I mentioned a moment ago, for technique and coordination, because there's a lot of technique involved. There's pedal adjustment we can do. Today, we're just talking about the way we're sitting. We're talking about thrown stuff, one step at a time. And this is really important. But to go the next steps, dive into some of these other lessons in the description about technique of bouncing the beater and getting more speed and volume and fluidity with heel down, strength building, coordination, all that good stuff. We've got some great lessons here on Non-Glamorous Drummer to help you out with that. So I hope at this point, if you've been following along with me, then already you should be feeling way better at your kit. Your thrown should be the right distance from your kick drum pedal, so you should be feeling more relaxed. You're now high enough that you're not feeling, slouched. Your core is not having to work as hard. Yes, it's having to work. Yes, you've got to build core strength, but you're able to sit in a more relaxed, good posture way that's not putting any unnecessary strain on anything. So you're set up for success. Even if you're a total beginner, you are now set up for maximum comfort on your drum set, comfort equals confidence, and confidence equals musicality. Musicality is the end game. That's what we're going for. So I hope this is helping you get there. I hope you've been following along to achieve that big success. So hey, let's talk gear before we wrap up, because these are some very valid questions of round versus bicycle seat, backrest, no backrest, airlift versus corkscrew. A lot of questions to ask when getting into drum stools, and there's so many options out there. And obviously we're all split on this because this is totally opinion subjective. There's not a best type of drum stool. This comes down to what makes sense to you. Do you want soft? Do you want firm? So many variables. So ultimately you just have to go to a music store and try them out. But I'll tell you some of my thoughts here. My goal is just to give you some tips for making a decision, because I don't want you to feel overwhelmed by the number of drum stools out there, because there are a million options to choose from. It's hard to know what's best. So I'm just going to give you some tips, some guidelines. I've used every type of drum stool out there, and so I'll tell you my thoughts. So round versus bicycle seat. I'm a big fan of round. Hate is a strong word, but I want to say I hate bicycle seat thrones. The reason why is because I like to sit on the front edge of my round throne. You can probably see from this camera over here how I sit on the front edge. Also, I'm pretty skinny, so I don't take up a lot of space on the stool. And so I'm really just sitting here on the front edge, and that encourages me to sit up straighter with better posture. I've always found that students who sit further back, I've had students that sit way back, if you're not careful, it will actually cause you to slouch and put more strain on your back. But also, you want to have maximum leg mobility, like be able to move your legs around and not feel a bunch of throne underneath your legs, like when you're sitting on a sofa. So you're going to feel freer and more able to do that if you're sitting toward the front edge. So I definitely recommend you do that. And by the way, that is going to play into that 2-to-1 rule earlier with finding your throne placement. If I were sitting in the middle or back edge of my throne, I would want it closer, obviously. So that whole 2-to-1 rule of, half of your height, take that from hoop to center, that works well if you're sitting on the front edge, at least for me. So keep that in mind. If I apply that method of sitting on the front edge to a bicycle seat throne, I end up feeling like I'm literally sitting on a bicycle, where it's like I'm just sitting right there on this little front edge of it, and it's not comfortable at all. I don't have any support out here toward my hips. I'm just sitting on this narrow front of the bicycle seat, if that makes sense. And so that just does not work for me. Now, we're all different builds, and my guess is that if I were a thicker build, then probably the bicycle seat would make more sense. But because I'm super skinny, the round just makes more sense to me. However, devil's advocate here, just alternate viewpoint. I have a student who really loves her bicycle seat throne, and it's just because she likes how it encourages her to sit in the same spot each time. When you have a throne that's a specific shape like that, you're going to sit down in the same spot each time because you memorize how it feels. Versus when you have a round throne, it's kind of easier to sit a little this way, a little that way. It's a little trickier to make sure you're consistent. So there's a plus for a bicycle seat style throne. It encourages you to make sure you're sitting the same way each time. But I think it does work best if you're sitting further back on it. And my theory is that if you're just a more heavy set build, it's probably perfectly fine as a throne. Versus if you're really skinny, you might prefer the round throne. So just my guess, but you have to figure out what's more comfortable to you. Of course, go to a music store and try them all out so that you can see what makes the most sense. Backrest versus no backrest. So this stool right here does not have the backrest on it right now, but it's sitting over there. And I like to attach the backrest from time to time. So when I'm playing, I'm not using the backrest. Even if I have it on here and I have it adjusted as far forward as possible, I'm sitting on the front edge, so I'm not leaning back against it. So again, this is a build thing, where probably if I were thicker built, I'd take more advantage of it while playing. But being super skinny, it just doesn't make sense for me personally. So I'm sitting like this as I'm playing most of the time. But a lot of times I love having the backrest on here so that when I'm not playing, I can just sit back and relax. Or if I'm doing coaching calls, I'm working with a student, or I'm at a long rehearsal and I just don't want to have to sit up and think about my posture for hours, it's great to be able to lean back against a backrest. That really can be a lifesaver and a game changer. I think especially as you get older. I'm still 29, but I know as I get older, I'm going to appreciate having more of a backrest back here. It's going to be great. So I know a lot of older drummers love that. It totally makes sense. So my thoughts there. The reason I don't have the backrest on right now is because I don't need it on while I'm making these videos. But also, I like to be able to move around the kit back here and not keep hitting the backrest. I can brush against the throne and it's going to spin around, and that's fine. And then just get it reoriented. Totally cool. I like just not having the backrest in the way, and it takes up more space. One last consideration, corkscrew versus airlift. So the majority of like the mid-tier drum thrones out there are going to be the corkscrew design, where you just spin the top, and if you spin counterclockwise, it goes up. You spin clockwise, it goes down. A lot of thrones are like that, and those are great. The higher end thrones, like the highest, most expensive ones, are the airlift, where you just pull the lever. That's what this one is, and it'll pop up and go back down. So quick, easy adjustments. One pro, this may be I don't know if this is a pro or a con, you tell me. A pro or a con to an airlift throne is that it spins freely. So that means as I'm sitting here on it, it's like I'm on a desk chair and I can just pivot back and forth. Versus on a corkscrew throne, it's more set in place. Yes, you can have that top head loose, where it's independently going to twist in relation to the corkscrew, but it's not just going to be a total free spin where you could sit on it and put your feet up and just spin around like a kid in a desk chair at Office Depot. And so it's a different kind of spin. It's not that free spin. I had a corkscrew throne for 10 years, and I just recently replaced it with this airlift throne. And I was totally fine not being able to freely spin, because as you're moving around the kit, you don't need to spin. You've got your snare here between your knees. That's going to keep you from spinning anyways. You're more twisting your shoulders, twisting your torso to move around the kit. So there's no real need to spin. I don't think that really matters. I think that's a negligible thing there. You might view it as a con because you don't want to feel shaky and feel like you're spinning. I think every airlift throne is going to do that, and I don't think there's a way to get rid of it, at least not with this one. If there is, tell me in the comments. Inform me about my DW9000 airlift throne that maybe I don't know everything about. But it doesn't matter to me whether or not it spins or whether or not it's stiff. Know that with an airlift throne, you're going to have that free spin. With corkscrew, it's going to be stiffer and more set in place. But of course, go to a music store, sit on a bunch of thrones, figure out what makes sense to you. This is a pretty firm one too. It's not one you really sink into. Some people like I think it's pork pie. Pork pie makes the really cushy ones. And cushy thrones are nice. The only danger of something that's that comfortable and that cushy is, for me, it makes me relax a little too much and kind of slouch. So I'd rather have it, be pretty firm where it's like, all right, I'm gonna sit up straight. I'm here to play the drums, not here to slouch and chill. Totally subjective, totally your opinion. Figure out what makes sense to you. Do you like the firmer? Do you like the softer? Know that the amount of squish is gonna inform how high you wanna go. So that's something you have to try out for yourself. But those are my best tips. Those are my best thoughts. But know that none of this is black and white, true or false, because it all depends on the drummer, and we're all different heights and different builds and have different preferences. And so ultimately you got to figure it out for yourself. But I hope that's helpful. So as we wrap up, I want you to tell me in the comments, because Gear Talk is always interesting. We love sharing our opinions on this stuff. Which is your favorite, round or bicycle seat? My guess is that we're probably split 50-50, just like how we're split 50-50 on heel up versus heel down. We can also talk about that. I remember polling my YouTube audience a few years ago, asking, are you heel up or heel down? And it was literally 50-50. My guess is that it's the same with this. Probably half of us like round, half of us like bicycle seat, a few of us like backrest. Anyways, tell me your thoughts. Tell me which is your favorite. And hey, going a little bit deeper here, what are you going to adjust right now to get more comfortable with your kit? I hope you've been following along with me. I hope you're already more comfortable because you followed along with the 2-to-1 rule and the 3-to-1 rule for finding the right placement and height. But hey, if you haven't done that yet, go do it. Go sit down at your kit. Go figure out, go do the 3-to-1, 2-to-1 rule, figure out what's most comfortable to you. Tell me in the comments, what are you gonna do right now to make sure you are getting more comfortable with the kit? This is important stuff. This is not just an optional, hey, it'd be nice to be more comfortable with the kit. Steven says I should be. No, this is important because the more comfortable you get at the kit, like I said earlier, the more confident you are. The more confident you are, the more musical you're gonna play, the more fun you're gonna have practicing, the less back pain you're gonna deal with. These are all really good things, and they compound on one another so that you become the musical drummer that you know you're made to be, so that you're nailing songs and having fun, and you're not having to worry about ergonomics and setup. This is all a means to an end. We don't wanna think about it. We don't wanna worry about it. So get it squared away now. Go take action. And before you go, be sure to grab that Know What to Practice 3-part daily practice guide for building your custom 30-minute-a-day practice routine. Those little bits of productive practice really compound over the long term, and that is how you grow. That is how you make progress. So this is going to help you out a whole bunch. Having clarity and direction and knowing what also to not practice and knowing what instead to focus on, that's how you grow fast. I want you to grow fast. I want you to become an awesome sounding drummer. This guide is going to really be a great shortcut and just guide for helping you get there, for helping you do that. Download it, print it off, take it to your practice room. So many students have gotten great results from this. It's got action steps, it's all super clear. Go dive in. Today is your day to grow, make some serious growth on the drums. I hope this video has been helpful. I hope this has been really helpful and valuable to you. I've had fun. I've enjoyed hanging out with you. I hope you've enjoyed hanging out today. I'll see you on the next lesson. Know that no matter what, you can do this. You can become the drummer you are made to be. Stay non-glamorous.